All right. So again, thank you and welcome to our summer learning series. In today's session, we are going to talk about reset planning for remote learning, remote career advising, and resetting and restarting school. And just a few things that I wanted to talk about before we get started. If you could, at all possible, turn on your video. It is always wonderful to see everyone's faces when we get into sessions such as this. It brings that personal dynamic to these calls. If you also could, please be sure to mute your line. And as you're coming in, if you would please add your name, position, and location in the chat, that would be wonderful. And also in the chat, if there are any questions or resources that you would like to share as we move through the session, please do so in that space. And active participation is valued and is an important aspect of today's session. So I highly look forward to our conversation and our dialogue around some of the questions that we have. So in our introductions, myself, I am Kayla Mickens. I'm from the Ohio Department of Education and the Career Connections Office as an education consultant. And I'm going to turn it over to my co-presenter to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Michael Turner, the Career and Technical Education Manager for Cincinnati Public Schools. I also manage the High Schools That Work program and also oversee the master schedule process for the district. Great to have everyone on here this afternoon.
And then we're going to get started with our agenda. So today we're going to talk about the elements of career advising, and then we're going to look at a lens on career advising using the overview of just some of the key points from the Reset and Restart Planning Guide for Ohio school districts. There's a lot to unpack there, and I just wanted to emphasize a few of these points to start the conversation. And then I'm going to hand it over to Michael to talk about Cincinnati Public's Reset Restart Plan, and also about their strong partnership that they have between their CTE and their career connection educators around the implications around career advising. So let's talk about career advising. We understand that there are our foundational framework for career advising. There's career awareness, career exploration, and career planning. And underneath these three tenets are several principles in which we operate within when we talk about career advising. We understand that career advising starts in the 6th grade and goes through the 12th. And within that framework, within awareness, exploration, and planning, we have areas in which we integrate our career connections learning strategies. We give students exposure to career pathways. We then implement our student success plans, which through the career advising policy is stated for students who are at risk of dropping out. But we, as educators, I hope understand the importance of all students having those student success plans. And now that we have legislation around graduation plans for students starting in the 9th grade, it provides greater emphasis and necessity for students to start early in tracking that progress through those student success plans into graduation plans. And as we look at a lens of career advising, I want to talk about, think about how we are challenging, preparing, and empowering Ohio students for future success through career advising. And all of these components are what I pulled from the Reset and Restart Education Planning Guide for Ohio schools and districts that was just very recently released last week. But I just wanted to point some pieces out to start the conversation. And I truly encourage you to really take a deep dive into this guidance as you're thinking through career advising and reset, restart planning. We know that equity must be the foundation of planning. Each Child, Our Future identifies equity as Ohio's greatest education challenge. And equity in education means that each child has access to relevant and challenging academic experiences and educational resources necessary for success. And that is inclusive of, no matter race, gender, ethnicity, language, disability, family background, or income. And we want to assure that we're placing great emphasis and inclusion around our students who are at high risk of medical difficulties related to COVID, We have to keep that in consideration as we're moving forward. Our homeless foster justice involved and otherwise highly mobile youth, creating a greater emphasis around those populations as well. And throughout every step of our planning process, our proposed strategies, approaches, and actions should be viewed through an equity lens. Asking the question, exhausting the why. How does each element of our plan impact equitable access to a quality education and equitable achievement for those who have been historically underserved? So just placing that emphasis on equity and social emotional, we know, is right up there and as a foundational piece of our planning, right? We know that each school and district have to have a positive behavioral interventions and supports process. It's a tiered model of prevention and intervention supports. And should be not just for students, but for staff as well. We as educators, we have to have that healthy social emotional balance. We have to have access to resources in order to be successful in supporting and facilitating our students in those areas as well. And with that also comes the family engagement, which is, we know, is a challenging component, but it is overwhelmingly essential for us to move forward. And thinking through the utilization of those multi-tiered systems of supports to meet the individual needs of each child, focusing not only on the academics, but the social emotional needs of the students as well. And then we look at the continuous improvement, the Plan, Do, Study Act. And we know we have our Ohio improvement process that's really developed to help support us in those efforts. And like the Success Bound Summer Series, it's creating those structures to learn from each other and facilitate communication and decision making between and across levels of systems. And this is inclusive of district, central office, school, grade level. Even it can go down to the content areas and classrooms. But these processes are to support the goal of delivering high quality educational experiences that meet the needs of students and results in student success. That is the core part of career advising, right? And then we talk about our modes of teaching and learning, which exhaust multiple areas, right? We have our in-class. We now have this heavy thought around remote learning. We still have our foundational pieces of remote work-based learning, our personalized learning, our project-based learning, our college credit plus, our internships, our pre-apprenticeships, our apprenticeships. And another thing that I want to just put greater emphasis on is leveraging our out-of-school time in mentoring and internship programs, especially now. There's a lot of community partnerships that are willing and have been raising their hand to see how they can help better support us as educators in creating environments and supporting students in developing career awareness and academic improvement for their future success. And then also looking at those data-informed approaches. I skipped over one. We know that those supports for student success and progress need to be put in place. And this is the greatest part, to utilize those student success and graduation plans to track academic progress and a student's post-high school planning. And as you are looking at your local information and your local data around your students, there was a point in the guidance document that talked about some tools and resources that will soon become available to help support in the diagnostic assessments of students. So it's really looking at the holistic idea of the assessments around students, but really looking at each piece of that data component. And then the other piece that I want to kind of add to start the conversation is the educational readiness and training. Those professional learning conferences and cross-entity collaborations, much like the learning conference you are a part of today and will hopefully be a part of for the rest of this month with us, but also looking more closely at your partnerships through your joint vocational school districts, your CTE centers, going beyond and looking at your juvenile detention centers, your community schools, after-school programs, and others in planning and delivering meaningful opportunities and experiences for students. So those are the things that I kind of wanted to just like put in the forefront of your mind as we're thinking through career advising in this new school environment, and looking at how we can support students moving forward. And this presentation will be shared today, which has the links to all that we are speaking to today. So with that, I am going to hand it off to my co-presenter, Michael, to talk about Cincinnati Public's Restart Reset Plan.
Well, good afternoon again, everyone. In April, which seems like an eternity ago at this point, our district, Cincinnati Public Schools, really started on this process that was called Future of Schools. There were two things really going on at the same time in our district. One really dealt with the logistical nature of a return to school, as far as cleanliness and hygiene factors and all of that. And then there was another branch that was dealing with the future of schools in connection with curriculum, delivery models, and anything connected with how do we get students back in seats if we can? What will that look like? And so there was really an incredible amount of research that was done. There were uh, representatives from all employee groups, parents, community, survey input, really from thousands of participants. The district really worked hard to uh, get different levels of plans out in front of the public and ask for the opinions as things were progressing. Next slide, please. And so, really, the purpose for what I want to present is to provide information about career tech and career advising in light of the decision that our Board of Education has made. Obviously, we are a small piece of the bigger puzzle, and so we've been anxiously awaiting to see what our school board would choose. And so, as I move forward, I just want everyone to think about that. Is that even though career tech and career advising may have a preferred way of maybe how we would do things, we fully understand and fully embrace the idea that we fit into just one of the many cogs in the wheel that run the district. And so we've been watching this process very closely, and we've been coming up with different plans on a what if sort of scenario. And so I'll be able to give you a glimpse into the process, but then also tie it back around to CTE and career advising. Next slide, please. So in May and June, after the process started in April, there were several plans that were submitted for public review. As this process moved forward, there were different iterations that have been narrowed and sometimes shifted in a different direction based on input. All of the plans presented, though, really had a common theme of addressing what we are about doing, which is delivering high quality education to our students. But in all of these plans, there were three areas that really were common in every plan. One was safety and health, another one was equity, and then finally accelerating student learning. One of the things that the district did, and we'll have a link in this slide where you can access the different board meetings that occurred and look at the files that were presented, but there was always a chart that showed a low level risk, a medium level risk, or a high level risk for safety and health. But then that also was balanced with equity and student learning, as far as you may have a high risk in connection with safety, and that may accelerate student learning, but you have to balance it out. Next slide, please. So what the Board of Education and Administration finally narrowed to in the last couple of weeks were three considerations that were presented to the board early last week. One was a blended format where over a 2-week period, students would attend 5 days. They would, half of the students would attend 2 days the first week, 3 days the second week, and then they would obviously be reversed so that one group was 3 days the first week and 2 days the second week. By splitting the students in half, in essence, we would be able then to offer a 6 foot social distancing rule, which some people have found to be extremely important. The other two options that were considerations for the board to look at last week was a 5 day week where everyone would return, in essence, throughout the week, no break, no shifts of students remaining home. That would come with 3 foot social distancing. And then the third option was a 4 day week where there would be one day off each week for deep cleaning, and that would also observe 3 foot for social distancing. Next slide, please. So on June 29th, last Monday, the board adopted the blended model. This will allow the district to provide a safe environment with equity across all grade levels. One of the plans that had been floated early in the process was having students in the earlier grades attend on a pretty regular basis and have 7th through 12th graders attend remotely 100% of the time. That was deemed as not being a very equitable situation for the students in our high schools. We do not have middle schools in our district. We have 7 through 12s. And so the district chose the blended model. And this would also allow us to be ready in case we have to move to more of a remote situation if there are shutdowns that occur later in the school year. So the link that is on this slide will take you to all of our Board of Education meetings. They've all been held virtually for the last few months. And if you go to this link, you'll be able to look at a PDF file for the last 2 or 3 meetings, and that will show you in pretty detailed form the different iterations of plans, but also some research that was done with what districts across the country and actually across the world have looked at in connection with the pandemic and how to return students to school. So I think that link you will find pretty interesting with the PDFs in particular. Next slide, please. And so then that really leaves us with 3 questions in our minds in our district in connection with our career and technical education programs and our career advising. Just before I go over the 3 questions, and then we're going to give you a chance to give some input, and then we're going to revisit these 3 questions again. But the way that we are set up in Cincinnati Public Schools is we have an Office of Secondary Education that houses a college department, a career and technical education department, a career blended learning department. We also have athletics, our experiencing homelessness program, and then our community learning centers are all housed in the Office of Secondary Education. So we know that most of what we do has a direct impact on the high school programs in our district. And so we've really been looking at what is the impact for the different buckets of work that we do based on what the Board of Education chose. And we honestly had no idea until this last Monday night what direction the board was going to move in. We are a growing district. We were forecast to be at 28,000 students last school year based on a projection from several years prior when we entered into our building plan. We are now at almost 37,000 students, so we're over capacity. We've been adding 1 school a year to deal with our increase in enrollment. So we've been anxiously awaiting, what would the district choose, because we have very unique circumstances in our area. Currently, also Hamilton County is one of the counties in Ohio that is experiencing a surge in COVID cases. School was supposed to start in about 5 or 6 weeks. And so all of this really has played into, I believe, what our school board chose to do. I just have to give kudos to Superintendent Mitchell and all of her leadership and the assistant and deputy superintendents as they have worked with her side by side in this process. I've been able to view it in such a way that it's been amazing to me in such a short amount of time that so much has been put into giving as much information as I think could have been given to our Board of Education members to make an informed decision. Everyone agreed that no matter what decision was made, there was going to be a segment of the community unhappy with that decision. And so I'm sure that many of you are experiencing similar issues in your part of the state. And so we've narrowed down that there's really three things that we have to look at as we delve into how does this affect career tech and then career advising. Our career advising is done across the gamut for all students, but we have some students who are in career pipelines who are not in a career tech program, and then we have some students who are in career tech programs who may not have a solid pipeline. We are gradually bringing all of that into alignment. And so I work very closely with Brittany Cousins, who is our career-based learning manager. And so we really have three things that we're looking at. So how do our current programs continue, considering that students are going to be in school half of the time at this point? We know that's how we're going to operate in August. And so how do we continue those programs knowing that we really only are going to see our students half the time? The second thing that we are focusing on is how do we accelerate student learning in our career and technical education programs uh, in order to move forward, but also to fill in the gaps that occurred from
Mm-hmm.
the spring shutdown. And then finally, which is a huge factor in career advising and involvement with the community, is how do we navigate these uncertain partnerships that exist right now? Because each of the places that we deal with have their own guidelines. They have to ensure the safety of their employees. They have to ensure the safety of their stakeholders. And so how do we have our students participate in a safe manner in pre-apprenticeships, internships, any other programs that exist, but also do that fitting into the guidelines that the different companies and hospitals and other organizations have. So we're going to revisit these three questions, but the next slide gives just a brief activity for us to be able to do. And so what we're asking you to do is go to the discussion chat feature, and we want you to type in your answer to this. What are some planning strategies that your school or district are considering in examining work-based experiences during remote learning? So again, what are some planning strategies that you're considering in examining your work-based experiences during remote learning? So if you could take a moment or two and just type in your answer, and then we're going to look at some of those and read them out loud, and we may even ask you to expand a little bit on what you typed. So Kayla, I'm not sure if I am seeing those, so I may have to depend on you to.
I haven't seen anything yet.
Oh, here, I actually see one right now. We are exploring how to create virtual experiences as much as possible, i.e., interviews, Zooms, working remotely, etc. That's really a great point. One of the things that we were able to do in our district, and I can't take credit for it, it was our career-based learning arm of the department. They were able to work with a pre-apprenticeship program that we have with TriHealth and get some of those students to do some virtual work with TriHealth, especially in June, to finish out some of their hours and be able to stay in touch. They were able to, I think, work with about 10 students. And so those most certainly are ways to go in connection with that.
Thank you for plugging that in. And if you are looking to share, just write it in the chat, and then we will share those out in that form. Thank you. I'm seeing some wonderful things come through. Appreciate you guys' participation and sharing out your information. I have Jessica Rhodes. She stated that they started a Faces of Summer social media campaign that recognizes student employees and community partners that employ them. This opens up the ability to showcase options in the community, and we will be available help with interviews and a remote option as well if needed. So that's really great.
That's a good idea. So thanks to Stephanie and Jessica for sharing. Kayla, what I can do if you want is go on to the next slide while we're waiting for some more, and we can always revisit those.
Absolutely.
Before we close out. So again, there are the three questions that we feel like are direct impacts on what we do with anything related to career advising and career tech. And so giving some thought to how do we address those. The next slide really gives us some ways to focus on how are we going to address this. So our district has, of course, the Business Advisory Council that each district has, but we also run a career tech advisory committee as well. Between the two organizations, our BAC meets over and above what is required through the legislature, and then our advisory committee meets over and above what is required through Perkins. And so between those two organizations, we do not have a lot of overlap of membership. There's some overlap, but not a lot, which is really a good thing because we're able to increase the stakeholder group. And so we'll need to be involving them in this conversation because they really are connected with the pulse of what's going on in our businesses. The other thing that we know that we have to do is we have to create very specific plans of action for each one of our pathways. Some of our pathways, for example, we have a lot of health pathways in our district. Health pathways could be particularly challenging because hospitals have different things going on, especially if there's an uptick in COVID cases. We're already hearing that may impact whether our students can go into the hospitals. And so we need to work pathway by pathway to troubleshoot and come up with solutions in connection with how do we get our students involved. Another thing which was already mentioned earlier is relying on remote interactions as much as possible. As I mentioned, we have had some success with this already. We're also starting to hear from different vendors who are creating products that will help you manage that. And so we're sifting through things like that as well. And then one of the unintended positive consequences we feel like of the blended model is it may give some students who do have room in what would have been their traditional school schedule, it may give them some full day flexibility to be able to maximize opportunities with businesses in connection with going out and learning about careers or doing internships or pre-apprenticeships. One of the things that we're trying to do from the school level is minimize entrances and exits as far as people go. And so having a student leave during the day, go out to a job site for an experience, and then come back is really not something that we want to do unless we have to. So if students are in school 50% of the time, it may be that we can rearrange things so that they do their work experience completely contained in a day when they don't come to school. So we're pretty excited about that flexibility that that will offer us with the blended model. Next slide, please. So as Kayla started us off with today, we know that hot off the presses, we have guidance being released from ODE. And so in addition to the overall document, the Office of Career and Technical Education for ODE just released a document called Approaches to Remote Learning for Career Technical Education. And so when you get this presentation, if you click on that link, it will take you directly to that document. The thing I like about the document is it has great resources in an overall sense, but also it drills down by pathway. Even if your school or district may not have a career tech pathway in a certain area, that doesn't mean that you may not need to take advantage of some career advisement in those areas. And so that document does a wonderful job of really dissecting the issue down to the pathway level. What you also see throughout that document are the things that Kayla talked about before. They're really though contained to like 4 areas in that document. It really stresses delivery, content, equity, and engagement when returning to school. It's interesting when I see those 4 words, I see that written all over what our district did. Now, again, I want to say that no matter what plan you choose, you are not going to have complete buy-in from every group because uh, somebody is going to be unhappy with a plan no matter what you do. But I will say that in our district, I've seen them focus on delivery, content, equity, and engagement. And even people who may not be completely happy with the blended model have paid great compliments to the district for the process that they followed. And I think it's because they focused on those 4 areas. I personally believe, based on what we see in career advisement and in career tech, that equity and engagement are going to be vital in this work. For it to work, we're going to have to make sure that we embrace those 2 areas. Kayla, did we get any more?
Um, we got a little more. What I would like to, Jessica Rhodes, if you wouldn't mind unmuting and kind of just giving us an idea of how the Faces of Summer, how that's gone for you, and just using an online social platform to help showcase your students, help showcase the local community businesses. And my question to you is, has that helped create an access point of awareness and educational and family engagement using that platform? Have you seen that connection there?
Well, today was actually the first time we've actually rolled that out. So today is kind of the first post that we put out there. We have a really strong business advisory, I guess, connection in our community with our district. So we have a lot of community partners already that we have established connections with. So with the shutdown, with COVID and everything, once those meetings stopped, we definitely did not want the commitments from those community partners to lapse. So we wanted to do something that, just in case we're more remotely based next year, just kind of giving that shout out to those businesses and keeping that connection going. And I actually just posted the first photo and shout out about 2 hours ago, and it's been very successful so far. So we've had a lot of good feedback in terms of the last few months with students being employed, even with the shutdown. In fact, even more than what we had in the past, just with businesses wanting to employ a younger generation. With they're trying to take advantage of the kids being at home. So we have a lot of our students, more than ever in the past, that are now employed, which is a good thing. I guess that's one thing that has been positive out of that. But we have, like I said, we have a really strong connection in the community with making sure that those community partnerships stay solid and keeping them on our advisory board, and just trying to get them in our school as much as possible. So it's been a really good positive thing in light of the situation.
Wonderful. Would you mind sharing a link to your post so that if others are thinking of doing something similar, they can have that to reference?
Sure, absolutely. I can link it in the chat.
Yeah.
We just actually have just a counseling Facebook page. We have a district page, obviously, and then we have a secondary counseling page for the middle school, high school. My partner and I, we post several things, so we didn't want to overwhelm the district Facebook page, obviously, because we post a lot of job openings for our students, as well as community connections, outreach, things like that. So I can definitely link our counseling page on there, and we can post 3 to 4 job openings a day that's just for students in our community, and a lot of our kids have been able to take advantage of that. So that's been real positive to have that separate link that students can follow. We recently kind of branched out even more because a lot of our students are not using Facebook. That's something that's more of a my generation thing.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that until I kind of got into that role. So we have branched out even more into Instagram and Twitter, and I see a lot more of the students taking advantage of those social media platforms for information. It's amazing how much you can reach the kids when you get to their level. They actually are really corresponding with us in terms of job openings and postings and things like that. So that's been real beneficial.
That's wonderful. Thank you. That's good. That's always good insight to keep at the forefront of our mind, is their modes of social media communication is very different than ours, even though we think we're in the same flow.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. And I know that you, and not to kind of keep hoarding on you, but I know that you just mentioned that you guys post careers and job opportunities that are tailored to your student population. Is that due to the relationships and the connections and the communications that are in line with your business advisory to place more emphasis on our younger workforce population? Is that something that's been pre-existing, that's part of your business advisory?
Yes. Well, my partner and I, we're fairly new to our positions. This is my 4th year in, and my partner's 5th year in at the high school level. And when we started, we really had a commitment to making sure that our students are being active members of society, because the last thing we want is to, keep them for the 4 years with us and then leave without any type of plan or connection to the community. Because we only, in our situation at our school, we only have about 40% of our students actually attending college. 20% of those are going away. The rest of them are all staying local. And what we saw was a large unemployment basis in our community. So we wanted to definitely change that. So once we really developed the business advisory into a larger platform, we implemented the Chamber of Commerce. We got the mayor on board. So it's kind of a community connection as a vision for our future of our town, to make sure that if the students are staying local, that there are jobs available, that they can actually make a living and raise a family and be active members of our society. So it's so much more than just what we're doing at the high school level. It's really a commitment to the community. So once you could get the community on board and know that that's going to benefit them in the future, that's when we saw a lot of doors opening up in terms of networking and job openings for students and things like that.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. So with that, I know a lot of information was brought to you today, and I hope that you found it valuable. I hope that you have some pieces to take away. Please, as we share this presentation, look at the PowerPoint that is part of the board meetings. I took a look at them myself. I thought they did a wonderful job, really just outlining the breadth of their understanding, their research, and their planning. And it's something that as a school or district, you might be interested in gleaning some information, even if it's just the process in which they came to their decisions. I think they did a great job at outlining that. So I wanted to give information on our next series session, which is going to be next Monday, July 13th, again at 1 o'clock, and it's going to be around implementing meaningful graduation and student success planning. You will see throughout these, they are layered, of course, on one another because all of this is infused and significant to each component. So we wanted to start you off with this digestive conversation about the overarching high-level piece of restart replanning and thinking through career advising in this new learning environment, as we now will in our next following sessions to kind of deep dive into each arm of how we are successful in supporting students in their future endeavors post high school. So with that, I want to thank you, Michael, for being my co-presenter. Thank you for providing the information you did today. Thank you for everyone who was on the call. There will be this information will be found on the ODE's website where the actual summer learning series information is provided. So you will find a link to this presentation and the recording there once it is available. So again, thank you all for your time. If you have any additional questions, please do send them to, I forgot to add that in there, the Career Connections email. If you have any questions, you can find that on the Ohio Department of Education's website. So with that, if you have any questions, please do send them to the Career Connections team. We are more than happy to help and support you. If you have any questions, I'm sure, about any further details around Cincinnati Public's plan, I'm sure that Michael would be more than okay if you reached out to him to get more information. Sorry, Michael, I just kind of put you out there.
No, that's correct. Yeah, I would be happy to talk to anyone.
But thank you all again for your time, and we will look to see you next Monday for our next session. And thank you again.
Thank you all. Have a great day.